Thank you for having me, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Can you introduce yourself to the class?
Sure. My name's Jennifer Boie, and I'm the director at the Palouse Conservation District in Pullman, Washington. And we cover conservation of natural resources in southeast Whitman County. So,
Okay, thank you.
mhm.
So my first question is pretty general. Just describe the mission of the PCD.
So the mission of the Palouse Conservation District is to proactively assist both urban and rural landowners throughout our part of the district, and we offer financial, technical, and educational assistance to landowners.
So is the Palouse a distinct area for conservation?
And now there are conservation districts all across the nation. Most areas are covered within a conservation district. One thing that's unique about conservation in our area is we've got such a unique difference in land uses here. So we've got a lot of the commercial ag, but we also have some small acreage landowners, and then we've got the universities here. So we've got a lot of residents that aren't landowners.
Mm-hmm.
So that affects the programming that we offer. And I think we have more diversity in our programs because we've got more of the urban center than some of the other districts throughout this part of Washington. And one thing that is unique about conservation in this area is we have 4 conservation districts in Whitman County, where most other counties might only have one. So
Okay. Oh.
yeah.
And looking to the future of PCD, how do you see PCD growing? In what ways or areas will its services expand or adapt?
I think traditionally conservation districts have been seen as entities that work really closely or exclusively with agriculture, and our district has become pretty diverse just because of the nature of the landowners around here or non-landowners. And so I almost see our programs developing into thirds: 1/3 working with commercial agriculture, 1/3 working more specifically with wildlife habitat and native plant reestablishment, whether that be riparian or Palouse prairie. So that's kind of unique. And then the other third being more urban based, working with citizens and volunteers to do in town restoration, more urban waterways work, or backyard pollinators. So we've got a pretty diverse program in that aspect. And as we move forward, I see us probably developing, either creating those 3 areas more distinctly or developing sub programs within those. And when you look across Washington state and you look at the different conservation districts as you move further west, it's pretty amazing the diversity in the programs that are being offered. And a lot of that is just basically based on what kind of funding they're able to secure and what kind of projects. So right now we're getting a lot of funding that's targeting water quality specifically because that's where the interest is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so would you say, yeah, that the grant money kind of directs how much priority goes into one of those thirds, or do you guys try to keep it pretty equal on the thirds?
I'd like to say we have more say in strategically deciding what funding and where we want to focus, but we're never really turning away funding. We're always looking for additional funding, so that kind of drives what programs we can offer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can certainly try to write grants more in one area than another, but most of the time it's going to be what you can come up with. One area that we've been expanding a lot lately and I see as being kind of the next big chapter in growth for the district is going after funding that focuses more on salmon and anadromous fish. Our whole southern boundary is on the Snake River, and in the past we haven't really sought out those funding sources. So we've really been expanding that in the last 6 months and are trying to look down that route for more funding.
Cool. Okay, so kind of moving on more in transition of just your role within the PCD. What is your role as executive director in fulfilling PCD's mission?
So my role is to take direction, policy direction from our board of directors and turn that into everyday action. So I'm involved in the day-to-day running of the district, whether that be everything from the budget to personnel and actually working on writing grants, securing funding, looking down the road at the future of where we want to go as an organization and trying to make sure that we're on route to get there. And then, all the day-to-day stuff, making sure we're hitting our grant deliverables and our targets, and making sure we've got proper staffing. And could be even just going out to do site visits with landowners. So the overall role that I should be playing, then spending 100% of my time, I probably only spend about 30 to 40% of my time actually directing the organization, and I'm still very involved in the day-to-day kind of implementation end of things too. So.
Okay. I think a good follow-up question for that would be, what's kind of like a normal day in your position?
Whew. I
If
don't
there
know
is
if I have
normal.
a normal day. Wow. I've only been in this position for about a year, and it was vacant for quite a while before I stepped into it. So I feel like it's taken that last year just to get things caught up and get into somewhat of a normal, I can give you a normal week, probably not a normal day.
Okay.
In a normal week, I'm probably spending a day or two in the office actually working on budgets, looking at our grants, and making sure that we're hitting our deliverables. I might have a day or two going to a meeting to work with our local partners and doing kind of planning or working on project implementation or going to site visits to landowners. And then also, I work a lot with our interns and our AmeriCorps members just to try to provide them some mentoring and give them some guidance on how they can stay involved in this field as they move forward in school. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Um, what are some of the recurring or major challenges of the position?
Um, I think the most major challenge is securing funding and making sure that you have adequate funding to offer the programs that you want to the folks that want to use your services. So that's a major challenge. So not just making sure that funding's there for them to use and put into conservation on the ground, but also securing enough funding to keep a stable staff on board so that you can continue to offer those programs and you don't just start something and it goes away with the next grant, when the grant ends. So kind of finding a way to provide that consistency and provide long-term stable programs to folks and to your own staff.
Let's see. So, what led you to working at the PCD?
I've been volunteering with the district for the past decade or so. And when I went back to school at U of I to work on my dissertation, I knew that going back to school and then trying to find work in this arena was going to be really challenging. The Palouse is a pretty competitive place for professionals. So I just kept my foot in the door at as many places as I could, and I was actually working about 4 different part-time jobs throughout my PhD program, and one of them was here as their education outreach program director. And I'd always wanted to be an executive director at a nonprofit, and when this door opened up, I kind of threw my name in the hat, and it was great, kind of having that, I guess, relationship with the district of being a volunteer in the past and then working part-time in one of their programs and then kind of stepping into the director role.
Awesome. Going along those lines, it sounded like, so you said you did know you wanted to be an executive director. So yeah, what were your plans in your education? Did you know you're going to be working with the environment or even being an executive director?
I've always known that I wanted to work in conservation, and I spent several years writing watershed plans for a private consulting firm, and then I spent about 6 years doing more on-the-ground implementation of restoration projects. And at some point in that track, I realized that with the amount of degradation that happens every day, it's pretty hard to keep up by continually restoring things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided that I wanted to focus more on the people side of conservation work and what are some of the conservation social science side of it. What are the social sciences related to how people interact with the natural environment and natural resources? And so I've always been really interested in education and outreach. And so my school track has kind of been a balance between focusing on the science side of conservation and restoration, and then focusing more on the social science side of how to work with people to get those programs on the ground and be more effective. And balancing those two things was put me in a good spot for being the director here, because I'd had a lot of experience managing staff and personnel and budgets, but then I also have an understanding of what it takes to put conservation on the ground and the biological side of it, as well as the importance of relationships and social networks and people for programs. So it all came together, and yeah, it's worked
Cool.
out.
What do you feel helped you the most to get in your position? So it sounded kind of like volunteering, or was there any other things that helped you get into your position here?
Yeah, staying connected with the community, whether that be through the volunteering, which was helpful, but just the social network of professionals on the Palouse and folks who are working in natural resources. It's a fairly small community here, and so I think just staying involved, showing you're dedicated to the resource that you're working with. So in this case, I was showing that I was dedicated to conservation work, and then just having that track record of having successful projects and being able to manage programs was really important to me getting into this position.
Okay. A good question, especially since it's just been a year, like you said, since you started. If you could give your younger self, so at the beginning of your career as executive director, 3 pieces of advice, what would they be?
I was kind of looking ahead at that one. If I could give myself 3 pieces of advice, I guess first of all, I would tell myself there's always going to be more work there than you can possibly do in a healthy fashion. And so just making sure that you're taking care of yourself, and these, a lot of these jobs are very demanding. And if you wear yourself out, you're not going to help anybody out. And so that's the feedback I get from my board too is, you know, you're careful you don't burn yourself out, because especially a lot of folks who get into nonprofit work, they're in that position because they have a passion for it, and so they love what they're doing and they love the resource, and it's hard to ever pull back the reins and tell yourself no when you really care about what's happening. So just trying to balance that and know ahead of time that there's always going to be more work than you can do. And so I guess the follow up to that is making sure you're surrounding yourself and placing people in the organization that also have a passion for it. And that take it seriously and who have a good work ethic is important. So making sure you build that team. And then third, making sure that you're using that team and delegating so that you don't take that responsibility just on yourself. At the end of the day, I mean, the director is going to be the one that's going to answer for what's happened and what hasn't and why. But doesn't mean that they need to do all the dotting the I's and crossing the T's, but they got to make sure they are. So working with your team and having really good communication with people and having a fun work environment. So I may have gone beyond 3 there.
Do you have any mentors throughout your career that helped guided you or you looked up to for advice?
Yeah, I've had several mentors. More recently, and since I've been working in this arena of conservation districts, Ray Ledgerwood is our regional manager for the State Conservation Commission, and so he kind of serves as a resource to local districts whenever they have questions and they need support. And he's been a real mentor for me. He grew up in this area. He knows a lot of the culture around conservation, and he's just got a wealth of knowledge, and he's been a real mentor to me. He's also a fantastic facilitator and has worked in, potentially stressful and heated, debates and local issues and topics. So he's got a lot of really great advice on just how to see the big picture on things, and how to take things in stride. So, yeah, he's been a great mentor.
Being a small organization, I'm assuming you probably wear a lot of hats. What are some techniques you use to balance your hats or kind of balance all these different priorities you have going on?
I have a lot of color coding on my calendar.
Yeah.
I work off deadlines, and I just, I'm always looking ahead to see what's due at the end of this week, the end of today, and trying to make sure that I meet those deadlines, as well as trying to look ahead to set up what's coming down the road in a couple months and getting the right staff in place to work on those things and making sure the tasks are delegated so that nothing's going to fall through the cracks.
Are a lot of deadlines, are they externally set or are they set by yourself? Like, what's kind of like the balance?
Sure. So they're all, because we're working all on grants, so we have external deadlines for everything. Mm-hmm. And so within those, then once we know what those are, we set our internal deadlines. So we have enough time to review things or coordinate together if we need to before we have to actually send it out the door to the funding entity.
Okay. I think so. You mentioned working with other organizations, and yeah, definitely a lot of different stakeholders that you work with. So an important question would be, what other organizations does PCD work intimately with? Can you describe these relationships and how you maintain good relationships with the other organizations?
Yeah, sure. So we work a lot with NRCS, which is the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and they're a federal entity. So they do conservation planning. They also set a lot of the guidelines that we work from as far as standards and specifications for the practices that we put on the ground for conservation. And so we work really closely with them, and we have a great relationship. We use a lot of their guidelines in our work. We meet probably in one way or another in the course of a couple months, several times. So we work really closely with them. We have 3 other conservation districts here in Whitman County, so we work closely with them, just coordinating and trying to partner on events so that not any one organization has to take on the bulk of the work. We also work with local nonprofits and local Fish and Wildlife Service. So we're constantly trying to work with these partners to coordinate on different aspects of who can offer technical assistance to landowners, and then how can our funding be matched, and how can we coordinate it to get farther. We also just kicked off last week Conservation Forum, and the idea behind that is trying to get all the folks who work within this area, whether they're agency, nonprofit, all of the actual practitioners of folks who are trying to get conservation on the ground, to meet every other month so that we have a chance to sit around the table and just collaborate on projects, having that kind of social network, because there's a lot of folks we know their name or we might know their face, but unless you make time to see them on a regular basis, that day-to-day collaboration just doesn't happen. I mean, I know in the past year, I have several people that I've said, I got to get in touch with them. We really need to touch base. But unless I get it down in my calendar on a set day or a regular schedule, it just doesn't happen. So the idea of this forum is kind of twofold. One, to enhance partnerships and provide an opportunity to collaborate on a every other month basis. And then 2, to help get the word out to the community about what we can do collectively and what each organization does for conservation on the Palouse. So I think that'll be a really good tool.
I think that's about all the time we have.
Okay.
So I appreciate you answering questions. And do you have any last comments or remarks?
No, I'm excited to hear that you're taking this course, and I think taking a course like that would have been helpful for me. So,
Yay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right, yeah.